Captain Elena Martinez stood at the observation deck of the Alliance flagship Stellar Guardian, watching as the distant star of the Centauri system dimmed. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Another world lost, another civilization silenced. The massive view screen showed the haunting imagery of the stellar tide's aftermath, a graveyard of ships and stations drifting in the void. "Status report," she commanded, her voice steady despite the weight in her chest. Commander Chen's hologram materialized beside her. "The evacuation ships made it through the quantum gate, Captain. 87% of the civilian population escaped." He paused, the slight tremor in his voice betraying his professional demeanor. "But we lost the orbital defense platforms and the entire Third Fleet." Elena closed her eyes briefly, adding these numbers to the mental tally she'd been keeping for the past decade. The Alliance had stood strong for over 3 centuries, their technological advancement and unity bringing prosperity to thousands of worlds. But none of that seemed to matter against the inexorable advance of the stellar tide. "The Council is requesting your presence at the emergency session," Chen added. "They're concerned about the strategic implications." Concerned? Elena couldn't keep the edge from her voice. "We just lost our strongest defensive position in the Outer Rim. Concern doesn't begin to cover it." The journey to the Council chambers took her through the heart of the Stellar Guardian. She passed countless crew members, each wearing the same expression of barely contained dread. The ship itself seemed to carry the weight of their collective worry, its usually bright corridors somehow dimmer. The Council chamber's massive doors parted silently. Inside, holograms of the Alliance's highest-ranking officials flickered in a semicircle. Some appeared calm. Others couldn't hide their agitation. High Counselor Venna, her crystalline form catching the light, spoke first. "Captain Martinez, your report on the Centauri defense." Elena stepped into the center of the chamber, activating her tactical display. A 3-dimensional map of the sector materialized around her, showing the devastating progression of the battle. "The Stellar Tide employed a new strategy," she began, highlighting key points in the simulation. "Instead of their usual direct assault, they divided their forces into smaller units. Each group targeted our sensor arrays first, then communications. By the time we realized it was a coordinated attack," she let the sentence hang. "They're learning," Admiral Drake's hologram noted grimly, "adapting to our defenses, while we remain rigid in our responses," Elena added, earning several sharp looks. "We've been fighting this war the same way for 3 centuries. Every time we develop a new defense, they eventually find a way around it. We need something different, something they won't expect." High Counselor Venna's crystalline features shifted in what Elena had learned to recognize as concern. "The Alliance military protocols have served us for millennia, Captain. They're based on proven strategies and—" A sudden alert cut through the chamber. Commander Chen's voice came through clear and urgent. "Captain, we're detecting an unusual signal from Sector 793. Well, you need to see this." Elena turned back to the Council. "Permission to investigate." After a moment's hesitation, Venna nodded. "Granted. But Captain..." Elena paused at the threshold. "Be careful. We cannot afford to lose another fleet." As Elena hurried back to the bridge, her mind raced with possibilities. The signal had originated from an unexplored sector, far from the current conflict. Perhaps they'd finally found something that could turn the tide of this war. Something different. Something unexpected. She couldn't know then that this signal would lead to humanity, and that everything about this war was about to change. Forever. The Stellar Guardian emerged from quantum space at the edge of a yellow star system. Captain Martinez leaned forward in her command chair, studying the third planet with increasing fascination. The blue-green world sparkled like a jewel against the void, clouds swirling across its surface in elegant patterns. "Life signs?" she asked, already knowing the answer from the way Commander Chen was practically bouncing at his station. "Billions," he confirmed, his hands dancing across the holographic displays. "And that's not all. I'm detecting artificial satellites, space stations, and..." He paused, double-checking his readings. Several thousand pieces of space debris. Alina raised an eyebrow. They're messy. They're innovative, Lieutenant Park interjected from her analysis station. Look at these energy readings. They're using at least 7 different types of power generation. Most civilizations stick to 1 or 2 proven methods. But these people, they're experimenting with everything. The bridge crew gathered around Park Station as she pulled up more data. Thousands of radio signals bounced between the planet's surface and its orbital installations. Military satellites shared space with weather monitors and communication relays, all operating on different frequencies and protocols. Their orbital defense network is unusual, Chen noted, highlighting several clusters of satellites. It's redundant, messy, but brilliant. If one system fails, 3 others pick up the slack. I've never seen anything like it. Alina was about to respond when a new signal cut through their observations. The humans had detected them. They're broadcasting on multiple frequencies, Park reported, sounding impressed. The message is being repeated in 400 different languages and mathematical sequences. Let's hear it, Alina ordered. A clear voice filled the bridge. Unknown vessel, you have entered Earth space. We acknowledge your faster-than-light capability and welcome peaceful contact. However, we are capable of defending ourselves if necessary. Please respond on any frequency. Alina smiled. Cautious but not hostile, sophisticated but direct. Open a channel. The main view screen activated, showing a diverse group of humans in what appeared to be a military command center. Their uniforms varied in style and color, suggesting multiple nations working together. The speaker, a woman with graying hair and sharp eyes, introduced herself as General Sarah Chen. No relation, Commander Chen whispered, earning a few quiet chuckles from the bridge crew. The next hours were a crash course in human complexity. While the Alliance had unified under a single military doctrine centuries ago, Earth maintained hundreds of different armed forces, each with unique strategies and specialties. They had armies specialized in desert warfare, others in Arctic combat. Some focused on cyber operations, others on space-based tactics. You mentioned you're at war, General Chen said during their 3rd hour of discussions. Tell me about your enemy. Alina described the Stellar Tide's relentless advance. The general listened intently, occasionally conferring with her colleagues in whispered conversations. Your tactics are too predictable, she finally said, surprising Alina with her directness. You're fighting a conventional war against an unconventional enemy. We have experience with that. The general pulled up historical records, centuries of human warfare displayed in rapid succession. Guerrilla campaigns, asymmetric warfare, psychological operations. Where the Alliance saw chaos in human military history, Alina began to see adaptability. Where they saw disorder, she recognized innovation. We don't just plan for the battles we expect, General Chen explained. We plan for everything. When conventional tactics fail, we invent new ones. When we're outgunned, we change the rules of engagement. Alina felt a spark of hope for the first time in years. The Alliance's rigid military structure had served them well in peacetime, but it had become their weakness in this war. These humans, with their messy, redundant, brilliant approaches to combat, might be exactly what they needed. General, Alina said, her decision made. I believe we have much to learn from each other. The Grand Council chamber of the Alliance hummed with tension as Captain Martinez finished her presentation. The holograms of various council members flickered as they processed the information about humanity. Some faces showed intrigue, others skepticism, and a few displayed outright concern. Let me understand this correctly, High Counselor Venna began, her crystalline form catching the light. These humans want to completely revise our military doctrine, a doctrine that has maintained peace across 20,000 systems for centuries. Alina gestured to General Chen, who stood beside her with perfect military posture. The human officer stepped forward, her presence commanding attention despite being the only organic being among the holographic audience. With respect, High Counselor, Sarah began, maintaining peace, and winning the war required different approaches. Your current strategy against the stellar tide is like trying to stop a flood by building a single perfect wall. She waved her hand, activating a holographic display of Earth's historical battle tactics. We learned long ago that adaptation is the key to survival. When faced with superior forces, we developed guerrilla warfare. When confronted with impenetrable defenses, we created infiltration tactics. Admiral Drake's hologram leaned forward. But surely such chaos would lead to increased casualties. Our current doctrine minimizes losses through predictable, calculated engagements. General Chen smiled. Permission to demonstrate. At Vena's nod, Sarah pulled up a simulation of the recent Centauri system battle. The Alliance fleet's precise formations and coordinated movements played out exactly as they had in reality, ending in devastating defeat. Now, she said, watch this. The simulation reset, but this time with human tactical modifications. Instead of meeting the stellar tide head-on, the defense forces split into smaller, more mobile units. Some appeared to retreat in disorder, drawing enemy forces into prepared ambush points. Others struck at seemingly random targets, creating confusion in the enemy's coordinated movements. Impossible, one of the council members whispered as the simulation ended with the stellar tide in retreat, taking heavy losses. We call it controlled chaos, Sarah explained. The key isn't to be stronger or more numerous. It's to be unpredictable. To think differently. Your enemy has adapted to your strategies because they're consistent. But how can they adapt to an approach that constantly changes? Elena watched the council members' reactions closely. She recognized the same journey of understanding she'd experienced herself when first encountering human military theory. There's more, she added, nodding to Commander Chen. He activated another display, showing detailed scans of the stellar tide's network patterns. Human cyber warfare specialists analyzed your combat data, Elena continued. They've identified patterns we never noticed. The enemy's strength, their perfect coordination, could be turned into a weakness. Sarah stepped forward again. We don't need to destroy their entire force. We just need to disrupt their ability to act as one. On Earth, we call it cutting off the head of the snake. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. For centuries, the Alliance had tried to match the stellar tide's coordination with their own perfect formations and responses. They had never considered that perfection itself might be a weakness. High Counselor Vena's crystalline features shifted in what Elena had learned to recognize as deep thought. What you propose goes against everything we've built our civilization upon. Order, predictability, control. Sometimes, Sarah replied softly, we must embrace chaos to restore order. My people learned this lesson through countless conflicts. We're offering you our experience, but more importantly, we're offering you a choice. Elena held her breath as Vena considered the words. Finally, the High Counselor spoke. We've spent centuries perfecting our way of war, she said slowly. Perhaps it's time we learned a new one. As the council chamber erupted in discussion, Elena caught Sarah's eye. The general gave her a slight nod. They both knew that the real challenge was just beginning. The war room aboard the Stellar Guardian buzzed with activity as humans and Alliance officers huddled around holographic displays. Captain Martinez watched as General Chen directed different teams through their analysis of the stellar tide's movement patterns. Look here, Sarah pointed to a cluster of data nodes floating in the display. Every attack follows a quantum wave pattern. They're not just coordinated, they're synchronized at the subatomic level. Lieutenant Park, who had been working closely with the human cyber warfare team, nodded enthusiastically. It's like a vast neural network, but it has to maintain quantum coherence to function. That's why they never split their forces too far apart. Elena leaned forward, studying the complex web of connections. And that's their weakness. More than that, a young human analyst named Miguel spoke up, his fingers dancing across the holographic controls. It's their entire foundation. The stellar tide isn't just an army. It's a single organism spread across space. Break the coherence, and the whole system falls apart, Commander Chen finished, his eyes widening with understanding. The next few hours were a flurry of activity as human and Alliance specialists merged their knowledge. The humans' grasp of unconventional warfare combined with the Alliance's advanced technology created possibilities no one had considered before. Traditional electronic warfare won't work, Miguel explained, pulling up simulations of previous failed attempts. But what if we didn't try to break their network directly? What if we made it break itself? Sarah smiled, recognizing where the analyst was going. Like a virus. Like a quantum virus, he corrected, expanding the display to show his calculations. We use their own synchronization against them. Insert corrupted data at key nodes. Let their perfect coordination spread it through their entire network. Alina watched as the simulation played out. The theoretical virus would spread exponentially, carried by the very mechanisms that made the stellar tide so formidable. How do we deliver it? That's where your technology comes in, Sarah said, turning to the Alliance officers. Your quantum gates can get small teams behind their lines. We don't need to fight through their defenses. We just need to insert the virus at these specific points. She highlighted several locations across the star map. Commander Chen frowned at the coordinates. Those are some of their strongest holdings. Getting teams in and out would be nearly impossible. Impossible for a traditional military force, Alina noted, beginning to understand. But what about small teams trained in infiltration? Special forces who know how to move unseen. Sarah's smile widened. Now you're thinking like a human, Captain. The plan took shape over the next day. Small teams of human special forces would be equipped with Alliance technology and trained in its use. Each team would target a different node in the stellar tides network, inserting the quantum virus simultaneously to prevent the enemy from adapting. It's insane, Admiral Drake's hologram declared when they presented the plan. Sending tiny teams against the strongest enemy positions we've ever encountered. That's exactly why it will work, Alina argued. They've never faced an enemy that thinks this way. They expect massive fleets, direct confrontation. They won't be looking for small infiltration teams. The Admiral studied the plan for a long moment. The risk to these teams would be extreme. We understand the risks, Sarah replied firmly. My people volunteered the moment we explained the concept. This is what we do. Admiral, we find ways to win impossible battles. Alina looked around the war room at the mixture of human and Alliance personnel working together. Where once there had been skepticism, she now saw determination. Hope. How soon can the teams be ready? She asked. Sarah checked her datapad. The first groups have already started training. Give us 48 hours. The countdown to Operation Quantum Strike had begun. Lieutenant Maya Patel's stealth pod emerged from the quantum gate in complete silence, its advanced cloaking technology rendering it invisible to both sensors and the naked eye. Her four-person team checked their equipment one final time as they approached the massive stellar tide command node floating in the darkness of space. Remember, Maya whispered over the secure comm channel, we only have one shot at this. Team 2, status. In position at target beta, came the quiet response from Captain James Wilson's team, halfway across the galaxy. Similar confirmations filtered in from the other 10 strike teams, each approaching their designated targets with precision that would have made their Alliance trainers proud. Aboard the Stellar Guardian, Captain Martins and General Chen monitored the coordinated operation. 12 holographic displays showed the progress of each team, while Commander Chen tracked the enemy's movements. They haven't detected any of our teams, he reported, a note of amazement in his voice. The human stealth protocols are actually working. Sarah nodded, her eyes fixed on the displays. The stellar tide evolved to detect large-scale threats. They never developed countermeasures for small team infiltration because they never needed to. Their perfect coordination is about to become their perfect vulnerability. Maya's team reached the outer perimeter of their target. The massive structure pulsed with quantum energy, its crystalline surface reflecting the light of distant stars. Instead of approaching the heavily defended main access points, they moved to what appeared to be a maintenance conduit. "Beginning Phase 2, Maya reported quietly. She placed her hand on the conduit's surface, activating the specially designed interface tool. Part human ingenuity, part Alliance technology, it began its work of creating a microscopic access point. Similar reports came in from the other teams. Each one approached their targets differently, using varied entry methods to prevent the stellar tide from recognizing a pattern. Some teams used modified maintenance drones, others created phantom power fluctuations to mask their presence. First package delivered, came Captain Wilson's report. One by one, the other teams confirmed successful implantation of their quantum viruses. Elena watched the tactical display, holding her breath. For several long moments, nothing seemed to happen. Then Commander Chen straightened at his station. "Energy fluctuations detected in Sector 7, he announced. "The virus is spreading through their network." Sarah leaned forward, studying the data, just like a neural response. "They're trying to isolate the corruption, but in doing so, they're spreading it faster," Elena finished. The display showed cascading disruptions across the enemy network. The stellar tide's perfect coordination was becoming its undoing. Maya's team was already retreating when the first major systems began to fail. The massive command node they'd infiltrated started pulsing erratically, its perfect rhythm disrupted by conflicting signals. "All teams, begin extraction," General Chen ordered. The strike teams activated their quantum beacons, allowing the Alliance ships to lock onto their positions for emergency retrieval. The tactical display erupted with new data as the virus spread exponentially through the enemy's neural network. Stellar tide ships began moving erratically, their synchronized movements degrading into chaos. Some units stopped responding entirely, while others executed random, conflicting commands. "It's beautiful," Commander Chen whispered, watching the cascade of system failures. "Their whole command structure is unraveling." Elena turned to Sarah, who wore a small, satisfied smile. "Your people did it. They actually did it." "We all did it," the general corrected. "Human ingenuity and Alliance technology, working together as one force." She paused as new alerts flashed across the displays. "But we're not finished yet. The real test comes in the next few hours." As the final strike teams returned safely through the quantum gates, Elena couldn't help but feel a shift in the very fabric of space itself. The war that had seemed unwinnable just days ago was about to change forever. The command center of the Stellar Guardian transformed into a symphony of alerts and status updates as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Captain Martinez watched in amazement as the tactical display showed the stellar tide's perfectly coordinated fleet breaking apart into increasingly chaotic patterns. "Status report," she called out, her voice steady despite the excitement building in her chest. Lieutenant Park's fingers danced across her console. "The quantum virus has reached 97% of their major command nodes. Their response times are degrading exponentially. Some battle groups are completely cut off from central control." Commander Chen pulled up a detailed analysis of the enemy's movements. "Look at this. They're trying to re-establish their neural links, but each attempt only spreads the corruption further. It's like watching a computer try to debug itself with infected code." General Chen stood beside Elena, her expression focused as she studied the tactical displays. Their entire strategy relied on perfect coordination. Now they're experiencing something they've never faced before: uncertainty. The massive view screen showed real-time footage from various sectors. Stellar tide ships, once moving in perfect unison, now drifted in confused patterns. Some clusters attempted to maintain formation, while others executed random maneuvers, creating near collisions with their own forces. "Message incoming from the Alliance Council," Commander Chen announced. "They're seeing the same thing across all sectors. The enemy is losing coherence faster than our most optimistic projections." Elena turned to Sarah. "How long until they adapt? They've always found a way to counter our strategies before." The general shook her head, a small smile playing at her lips. That's the beauty of it. Their adaptation mechanism is part of their neural network, the very system we've corrupted. The more they try to adapt, the more damage they do to themselves. New alerts flashed across the displays as Alliance fleet commanders began reporting in. The enemy's confusion was creating unprecedented opportunities for counterattack. Ships that had been in retreat for months now found themselves facing a disorganized, vulnerable opponent. Message from Admiral Drake, Lieutenant Park announced. He's requesting permission to launch a coordinated offensive while the enemy is compromised. Elena and Sarah exchanged glances. This was the moment they'd planned for, but it required perfect timing. Too soon, and they might give the stellar tide a chance to recover. Too late, and they'd miss their window of opportunity. Tell the Admiral to proceed, Elena decided, but remind all fleet commanders to use irregular attack patterns. We don't want to give them any predictable responses to analyze. Sarah nodded in approval. Keep them guessing. Even in their compromised state, we can't risk them identifying a pattern they can adapt to. The next hour unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. Alliance ships struck from unexpected vectors, using tactics derived from centuries of human warfare. Some ships appeared to retreat, drawing enemy units into carefully prepared ambushes. Others executed lightning raids on critical infrastructure, further disrupting the stellar tide's attempts to reorganize. Enemy response times now degraded by 85%. Commander Chen reported, unable to keep the excitement from his voice. Their command structure is collapsing sector by sector. Elena watched as position after position fell to the Alliance counteroffensive. Years of losses were being reversed in hours. The stellar tide, an enemy that had seemed invincible just days ago, was coming apart at the seams. It's really happening, she whispered. Sarah placed a hand on her shoulder. This is just the beginning. The next phase will be critical. We need to make sure they can't recover and reorganize. As if in response to her words, new alerts began flashing across the tactical displays. The stellar tide's response to their desperate situation was about to reveal itself, and Elena had a feeling the war's final hours would be its most challenging. The tactical display aboard the Stellar Guardian suddenly shifted, its patterns changing in ways that made Captain Martinez lean forward in concern. The stellar tide's scattered forces were moving again, but not with their usual coordination. This was something different. They're consolidating, Commander Chen reported, his voice tense. Multiple battle groups are converging on central points throughout the network. They're trying to establish isolated command nodes. General Chen studied the movements with narrowed eyes. They're attempting to quarantine themselves, break their network into smaller independent segments to stop the virus from spreading further. Smart move, Elena admitted. But is it too late? Lieutenant Park's hands flew across her console. The virus has already infected 98% of their primary systems. These new isolated nodes are working with corrupted data. There just doesn't know it yet. The massive view screen showed the desperate maneuvers of the stellar tide forces. Some groups successfully established independent control, their movements becoming more coordinated on a local level. Others fell into even greater disarray, their attempts to isolate themselves creating cascading failures through their remaining systems. Message from Maya's team, Commander Chen announced. They've analyzed the enemy's new behavioral patterns. The isolated nodes are showing signs of evolution. Sarah moved to his station, examining the data. They're not just isolating themselves. They're developing new protocols on the fly. Each node is becoming a distinct entity. Is that a problem? Elena asked, watching as more enemy units broke away from their main groups. The general's lips curved into a slight smile. On the contrary, they're doing exactly what we hoped they would. The stellar tide was powerful because it thought and acted as one. Now, they're fragmenting into thousands of independent units, each one trying to survive on its own. New alerts flashed across the tactical display as Alliance fleet commanders reported their observations. The enemy's desperate attempt to save itself was actually accelerating its own downfall. Each isolated node developed its own tactics, its own priorities, its own understanding of the situation, all based on corrupted data. Incoming transmission, Lieutenant Park announced, surprise evident in her voice. It's from one of the stellar tide nodes. They're requesting communication. The command center fell silent. In 3 centuries of conflict, the stellar tide had never attempted to communicate. They had simply advanced, consumed, and continued their relentless expansion. Put it through, Elena ordered after a quick glance at Sarah. The transmission was unlike anything they'd ever encountered. Instead of words or traditional signals, it was a complex pattern of quantum data. Lieutenant Park worked quickly to translate it. They're confused, she reported. The node is trying to understand why it can't reconnect with its network. It's experiencing something like panic. They've never known isolation before, Sarah observed. Imagine being part of a vast consciousness your entire existence, then suddenly finding yourself alone. Elena watched as more nodes began transmitting similar signals. The stellar tide wasn't just being defeated, it was experiencing an existential crisis. The perfect union that had made it so formidable was shattering into countless individual fragments, each one discovering individuality in its final moments. Alliance Command is reporting similar transmissions across all sectors, Commander Chen added. The enemy fleet is effectively neutralized. Some nodes are shutting down completely, others are attempting to retreat to deep space, and some will try one final desperate attack. Sarah warned. We need to be ready. Cornered enemies are often the most dangerous. Elena nodded, sending out orders to the fleet. The war was nearly over, but these final moments would require the same careful strategy that had brought them this far. The stellar tide was experiencing its first taste of chaos, and its response would determine the fate of countless worlds. 1 month after the fall of the stellar tide, Captain Elena Martinez stood in the newly reconstructed Alliance Council chamber. The room buzzed with an energy she had never felt before, a mixture of hope, pride, and cautious optimism for the future. High Counselor Vena's crystalline form shimmered as she addressed the gathered representatives from both the Alliance and Earth. The integration of human military doctrine into our forces has proven more successful than any of us could have imagined, not only in defeating our enemy, but in transforming our understanding of warfare itself. General Chen, now wearing the newly created insignia of Human Alliance Joint Command, stepped forward to present her report. The holographic displays showed the current status of the former conflict zones. 97% of the fragmented stellar tide nodes have been contained, Sarah explained, highlighting various sectors. The remaining 3% have retreated to uninhabited regions of space, where specialized teams are monitoring their evolution. Commander Chen brought up detailed scans of the isolated nodes. The most fascinating development is how each fragment is developing independently. Some have established peaceful contact with our observation posts, displaying signs of individual consciousness and even curiosity about their own origins. From a single overwhelming threat to thousands of unique entities, Elena mused, each one learning to exist as an individual rather than part of a collective. Lieutenant Park, recently promoted for her role in developing the quantum virus, added her own observations. We're seeing remarkable adaptations. Some fragments have developed completely new ways of processing information, free from the constraints of their former neural network. They're becoming something entirely different. The council chamber filled with appreciative murmurs as the implications became clear. What had begun as a desperate military strategy had evolved into something far more profound, the birth of new forms of intelligence across the galaxy. But our work is not finished, Sarah continued, switching the display to show the Alliance's reformed military structure. The success of our joint operation has opened new possibilities for cooperation between humans and the Alliance. Elena watched as the general outlined their plans for the future. Traditional Alliance military doctrine was being merged with human tactical flexibility, creating something entirely new. Training programs were being established to teach Alliance officers the art of adaptive strategy, while human forces learned to utilize advanced Alliance technology. We proposed the creation of a new division, Sarah explained, specifically focused on unconventional problems that require innovative solutions, a force that combines the best aspects of both our civilizations. High Counselor Venus' crystalline features shifted in what Elena had come to recognize as approval. The events of the past month have taught us a valuable lesson. Perfection, we have learned, can become a weakness. It is in our differences, our adaptability, and even our apparent chaos that we find our greatest strength. The Council voted unanimously to approve the new initiatives. As the chamber erupted in celebration, Elena found herself standing next to Sarah at one of the observation windows. Below them, the capital city sparkled with lights, its streets filled with beings from both civilizations working together to build something new. "Did you ever imagine it would end like this?" Elena asked, watching a group of human children playing with young Alliance beings in one of the city's parks. Sarah smiled, her eyes on the same scene. Captain, this is just the beginning. We've proven what we can accomplish together. Now we get to explore what that really means. As the two officers watched the sun setting over the city, Elena reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. The Alliance had gained more than just victory. They had discovered a new way of seeing the universe, and humanity, in helping to save the galaxy, had found their place among the stars. The real adventure, she realized, was just beginning.